let's go through the steps of creating 3 different types of floors. Underneath the Architecture tab, the kind of floor that we want will be a 4-inch concrete. So type in 4-inch space concrete, then click on OK. Next to structure, there's an edit button. Select on edit. For the structure, the thickness will be 4 inches. And now we need to choose the material that this floor will be made out of. Of course, it's going to be concrete, so that's what we want to choose. So where it says by category underneath material, click, and then you'll see a box that has 3 dots in it. Select on this little box. When you do, it'll open up the material browser. And with the material browser, let's scroll down, and we want to look for our concrete floors. Now we could choose any of these concretes, but let's select on concrete lightweight. Now this isn't exactly the material that I want. I really want a material that's just called concrete. So to create that material, right click where it has the concrete lightweight and duplicate. Now we can see we have a duplicate of this concrete lightweight material up above. Let's rename this just concrete. So name it concrete, then click off of it. When you do, it'll put it in alphabetical order and you'll have concrete up here at the top of the list. Select on your concrete, then click on OK. So now we have a concrete floor which is 4 inches in thickness. And click on OK. Click on OK one more time, and then we can see on the type selector list, we now have a floor which is 4-inch concrete. Now let's make 2 more floors. Both of these will be based off of existing floors, but instead of having one kind of floor that is both structure and the finished materials, we want to create 2 floors which are both just the finished materials. Let's start off by creating a ceramic tile floor. So here on the type selector list, click, and let's look for ceramic tile. We have wood joist 10-inch. Delete. Do the same thing with number 4. Select where we have number 4 here, and you notice that it isn't letting us delete this layer of material. So we'll leave it there for right now, and then come up here to layer number 2, which we can see is this concrete cast in place gray, as well as the finish 2 tile mosaic gray. What I'd like to do is for each one of these, select and then move them down so that they're between our core boundaries. So click, move them down. Next thing is to select on the number 4, and you'll notice that now we have the option to delete this layer of material. There always needs to be some sort of material between our 2 core boundaries, which is the reason why it didn't let us delete number 4. So that if we just go through this process and we don't do anything else, what will happen is it will try to delete these floors if we deactivate the floor command. So one of the things that I've been able to do is you actually draw a floor in place where it's supposed to be at. Or the other thing that you could do is just temporarily just place in a floor. And in this case, I just drew a rectangle and then click on the big green check mark to sort of finalize it. And now I'm going to select back on that floor and hit the delete key. And by doing that, if we come back underneath the architecture tab and select on floor, we'll now see that we still have our carpet finish, our ceramic tile floor, as well as the other floor that we created, which is the 4-inch concrete floor. To draw in a basement floor, we first need to have a level, which is the basement floor level, that has a floor plan associated with it. So to create this basement floor plan level underneath the project browser, let's go to our elevations and then double click on the south elevation view. Here we can see the different levels that are currently inside of our project. And then place a level in like that. You can hit the escape key a couple times on the keyboard to get out of the level command. You can then zoom in, select back on that level, click on the little circle that's on the end of it, and then drag it over so it's going through the building. Now you can take it all the way out to the very end if you wanted to, or you could just leave it once it goes all the way through the building. Then zoom in onto where the actual level head is located at, which has the text which names the level. Make sure that it states -8 foot 4 inches, because that is but if you have a section through your building, begin to take a look at that floor by selecting on the section, right-clicking, and then going to View. Right now it's kind of hidden by my words down here, so what I'll do is select on one of the individual levels. And there's a little tiny blue dot down here. Click and hold your mouse button down on the little blue dot, and that'll pull all the levels out to the side. Then click over here, and now we can see here's the basement floor associated with those levels will rise and drop along with the level. Now we can come back into our 3D view again, zoom back out, and then look at the bottom of our building by just clicking on the lower corner of the view cube between front and right. And now we can see the floor that makes up our basement floor. To model a garage floor, we first need to be in a floor plan view. Under the project browser, floor plans, open up the top of foundation view. Then zoom into the right-hand side of our building. Just move your cursor over to the garage area and then spin the wheel on the mouse. Come up to the Architecture tab and then select on Floor. Under Properties on the Type Selector list, verify that the floor is floor 4-inch concrete. Then select Line. Zoom into the upper left-hand corner of the garage. Then click at the intersection of the wall and this gray line. The gray line that we're looking at here is actually part of the foundation wall that's supporting the wall up above. Once you get to the intersection of these lines, click, then draw a line straight across. Then select on the middle of the back line of the garage floor. Zoom out. Then draw this arrow straight down until we get in line with this magenta line. Now it's going to be a little bit hard to tell whether or not you're lined up exactly with it. As long as you're close, I'll be happy with that. So get it to right about that location. Once you have your arrow in place, the next thing that we need to do is tell Revit what the height should be at this end, and then at this end, here is that we now have the floor, and it's coming down here. If we zoom back out and spin the building around, and we can do that by just clicking on the corner of the view cube, we can see that the floor is sloping down. In fact, if we zoom into this wall, we can see it's sloping down from here. There are 3 things to consider when placing a floor drain in a floor. The first thing is, do you want the floor to actually slope down to the floor drain? Technically, you may be able to just use line work and notes to indicate that the floor is sloping down to a certain point. But for this model, let's slope the floor to the actual floor drain. The second thing to consider is, where should the floor drain actually be placed at on the floor? Well, obviously, it should go to wherever the floor needs to slope to, because that's why the floor is sloping, so that the water can then slope down and then flow out of the floor drain. In this model, it'll be in the upper right-hand corner of the basement, right about where my cursor is now. The third thing to consider is, should the entire floor slope down to the floor drain, or should just the top of the floor slope to the floor drain? Usually, you just want to have the top of the floor slope down to the floor drain instead of the entire floor. So that's what we'll do. To begin, let's zoom in so that we have our floor plan centered on our screen. Next, we need to select on the basement floor. To select on the basement floor can be a little bit tricky, so what you need to do is just highlight over the upper wall and click the Tab key. or slope down to that point. So it's 2 inches lower at this location than it is at the outside corners of the building. Now hit escape a couple of times on the keyboard, and the next step is to place the actual floor drain in. Underneath the architecture tab, we can come up to the picture of component, and then on the type selector list, make sure that floor drain -round 1 has been selected. Now there's 3 different ways you can place a component family. One is by vertical face, which won't work in the case of this floor. The second way is place on a face, which is the way that we'll ultimately use. And the third way is to place on a work plane. Placing on work plane works very nice if you want this floor drain to be nice and straight up and down. So that may actually be one of the better choices. But for this example, we'll use place on face instead, because it'll be fairly easy for us to use place on face and then select on the intersection of these lines. Once you're at the intersection of the lines and place on face has been selected, we'll click and then zoom in order to see that in fact we do have our floor drain in the correct location. In this lesson, we'll create 2 separate porch slabs, one for the back porch and then one for the front porch. For the back porch area, I want to place a 9 by 12 slab in the back. So underneath floor plans, the project browser, let's go to grade level, because this slab will be sitting directly on grade. Then zoom in where we have these doors in the back of our building. So spin the wheel of the mouse in order to zoom into the back of our home. Underneath the architecture tab, let's select on floor, because even though it's a concrete slab, it's still a floor. Now we really don't need to have a 4-inch thick slab for this back porch. What I'd like it to be is a 3-inch. The next thing I'd like to do is move these lines so that they're centered on our door. And we can do that by just hitting escape a couple of times on the keyboard, clicking and holding the mouse button down in the upper left-hand corner, and then windowing around each of these lines. And then you can let go of your mouse button over here. Then use the move command by selecting on move, picking the midpoint of the line, and then dragging this straight over until you get that straight up and down line between your doors. And then click to put this in place. Now click on the big green check mark in order to place this concrete slab here on the grade level. And what I'd like to do is have a slab that comes out from the building 6 feet comes across, comes back in, and then comes back around again. So to do that, once again, the Architecture tab, select on floor, choose that floor 3-inch concrete. Next, pick the line tool, put the intersection of these two lines, and then come straight out by 6 feet. Draw straight over. You get lined up with this line, you get a dashed line. Click, come straight up, and now take this all the way back to the face of the house. Basically, I want the slab to butt up against the face of the house. Come straight across, and then finally come back down to that starting line again. Then hit the escape key a couple of times on the keyboard in order to get out of the line drawing part of the command. Now, one thing that we've done is we actually stayed inside of the grade level when we were drawing this, and I'd like the slab to actually be higher than that. In fact, this should be up near the top of foundation level. So let's change this from grade level up to top of foundation. Also, we really need to make an adjustment for the overall thickness of this floor. So let's change this height offset from level from being 0 feet 0 inches to 3 inches. Then click on the big green check mark. It'll ask, would you like the walls to go up to this floor's level to attach to its bottom? We can tell it yes to that question. And join elements. Now let's take a look at this in a 3D view. So select on your default 3D view icon. Let's zoom in. And now we can see the porch slab and it's sitting on top of this wall right here. Well, there's one other thing I like to do with the porch slab, and that's have it slope. The piece of information, and that is slope. So select slope for the height offset of tail. We'll just select 0 for that. And now the slope should be 1/8 of an inch over 12 inches. So a very gentle slope. So for the slope, have 1/8 / 12 inches. You can click apply or just move your cursor out here and then pick the big green check mark in order to have this floor slope down. I'll just tell it yes to that question. I'll join the elements. Now we can see that it's sloping down from this point as opposed to sloping straight up. And now let's take a look at the back of the house so that we can see that concrete pad that we placed in the back of the house. So if we just zoom out, there's the large concrete pad, and we can take a better look at it if we click the upper right-hand corner of the view cube, spin the model around to see this back porch area here in the back. We currently have a front porch on our house, but it's raised up above grade. And what we need to have is a foundation wall poured underneath this part of the slab. So to place the foundation wall in the project browser, in floor plans, we need to go to our top of foundation view. So double click on top of foundation, then zoom in by spinning the wheel of your mouse to our front porch area. On the Architecture tab, let's select now on the picture of the wall. Then in Properties, for the basic wall, let's choose the foundation 8-inch concrete. So let's zoom back out and then spin the model around. And you can do this by either clicking on the corner of the view cube or by holding down the shift key and the wheel on your mouse. Then zoom in tight so that we can take a better look at what's going on here. Right now we can see that the concrete slab is actually crossing over where our walls are located at. And we really want to have the slab sitting on top of these concrete walls. So to do that, let's zoom back out and then highlight over one of the walls. When one of these walls is highlighted, click the Tab key on your keyboard to select all 3 of the walls at once. Click to highlight all the walls. We come up here to Attach Top Base and select that slab that's going to make up our front porch area. Click, and by doing that, the walls have now dropped down to be underneath the concrete slab. If we zoom back out again, we can then hit the escape key a couple of times on the keyboard to get out of the command and take a better look at how our foundation walls are now supporting that slab up above. We'll go in the project browser, floor plans, and then make sure the top of foundation is open. Once you're in the top of foundation view, go to the architecture tab. Then under architecture, select on the word column. When you do, you'll get a pull-down menu, and there's two different options there. One is a structural column, and the other is an architectural column. Probably along this face over here on the left-hand side. Move straight up, and then let's move these columns up to the face of the wall. Click to place the columns, then zoom out. You can escape a couple times on the keyboard to get out of your copying command. And now let's take a look at our columns in a 3D view. So select on the default 3D view button. Let's zoom back in. Now there is one little change that we need to make to each of these columns. And that's the fact if we zoom in, we can see that they're currently going all the way through this surface. And what I'd like to do is actually just have them be flush with the top of this surface. So to accomplish that, we'll zoom back out so we can see all of our columns. Select on one of the columns, I don't care which one. Then right-click, go to Select All Instances, Visible on View. And now we've selected all of those columns. Come to Attach Top Base, and then where it has Attach Column, what we need to do is make sure that Base is selected, because this means we'll attach the base to the bottom of the column to this porch surface. So now let's select on this concrete floor, what I'm calling the front porch surface. By doing this, we've now raised the base of the columns up to the surface of the slab. Now we can zoom back out, and if we need to make further modifications, we can always do that when placing the beams that will support the roof up above this porch. Our basement columns hold up the first floor level of our building. In order to place our basement columns, we need to be in the basement floor plan view. In the project browser, in floor plans, double-click on basement. Then zoom in on our basement floor plan. When you do, you'll see that we have the exterior walls around the perimeter of the basement floor, and the basement floor sloping down to a floor drain. Now, unfortunately, even though this is a lot of information, this isn't the information that we need in order to know where our column placement needs to be located. Our columns right now need to avoid a staircase which is coming down from the first floor. So to see where that staircase is located, we need to turn on the first floor here in the basement view. To accomplish that, underneath Properties, next to the word Underlay, we currently see Top of Footing. Well, let's change top of footing to become first floor. Then it says that the top level is up at the top of foundation. That's okay as well. And again, we'll probably need to make modifications to each one of these columns so that they are at the right elevation on top in order to support the beam that ultimately we'll be drawing going across to support the floor up above. I'm going to hit escape a couple of times on the keyboard. Now the next thing that we need to do is start to place in our footings at each one of these locations. To do that, we need to go back into the basement floor plan here. So I'm going to double click on basement. Next, let's go to the structure tab. Then from the structure tab, it may give us a warning saying that we can't see any of these in this view, and that relates to the overall view depth associated. But if we look at this in a 3D view now, by coming up here to the default 3D view, and then spinning this model around by just holding down the Shift key on the keyboard and then the wheel of the mouse, or by clicking on the corner of the view cube between front and right, we can spin this around, and now we can see that we have these nice concrete pads directly underneath our column structures. Let's place a beam that will be at the top of foundation level, and the purpose of this beam will be to support the first floor up above. Since this beam will be at the top of foundation level, we need to go to the top of foundation floor plan. Under the project browser and floor plans, double-click on top of foundation. Then zoom in to the left-hand side of our floor plan, where we have the green dashed line that will be the center of our beam. Now select on the Structure tab of the ribbon and then click on Beam. And under Properties on the Type Selector list, let's look and see what other sizes we have other than W12 by 26. So if you select on the Type Selector list, you'll notice that right now the only size that we have loaded is a W12 by 26. So what we need to do is W8 by 10. And you'll need to scroll down to near the bottom of the list. Select on the W8 by 10, then click on OK to load that size into the project. And it'll give us a very intimidating looking warning message saying that you'll override the W1 flange family. And are you sure that you want to do that? And the answer to that question is yes, you do. So we'll override the existing version. Under Properties, change it from W12 by 26 to that W8 by 10 that we just loaded in. Now zoom into the left-hand side of the building, here at that green dashed line, and then at the middle of this wall, you'll get this cross of dashed lines, and that's where we want to start our beam. Click once, zoom out, they come all the way on across, then in the center of this wall, which splits up the basement from the garage, you want to click again in order to place our beam in that location. Now right now we can see that I have a double line here for the beam. Here's one side of the beam, this is the other side of the beam. If for some reason you don't see that, just come down here on the list, and where you have your detail level, make sure that your detail level is set to fine. If for some reason it's set to coarse, you may not be able to see it. So if you should set it to fine, you'll then be able to see the overall thickness of that beam. We'll zoom back out again. Now we can take care of some of this through just typical drafting. But what I'd like to do is move the top of these columns down so that they're supporting the beam going across. So let's select on one of these columns, right click, and then select on all instances visible in view.